If you've been booking podcast interviews, but you feel like you're all over the place, and even when you have a great guest, you feel like the guest experience leaves a lot to be appreciated, then this video is for you. Look, if onboarding your podcast guests feels chaotic and stressful, then you will be like a lot of podcasters. But the good news is it doesn't have to feel that way. So I'm going to walk you through 4 simple steps to make your guest experience effortless and make it valuable so that you don't feel like you're chasing after guests and that you're frantic by the time you record your episode. Now, before we get into these steps, there are a couple things that we need to address, which is really important if you want to take your podcasting seriously. A lot of people approach podcasting kind of like in a nonchalant way. They're winging it and their shows are coming out. Some are good and some are not so good. And most of them don't generate any revenue, and they're not thinking about how this show actually brings their audience value. There's so many issues there. So before you invite anyone onto your podcast or before you agree to have someone on your podcast, there are a couple things that you need to have in place. So basically, you need to lock in things like your recording schedule, your basic setup, so whether that's video or in person, what the podcast is about. The things that might change are like the subject or topics you're covering right now and the qualifications for your potential guests. As you level up, you might have a harsher and harsher criteria, and that's okay. But the main point is, if you lock in some of these details, it makes the guest experience streamlined, and you can automate it when you've got a couple of these under your belt. So the first step is to capture when folks express that they're interested in being on your podcast. So how do you capture that information, and then how do you onboard them onto your podcast? Whether you're doing outreach for your show or more people are reaching out to you these days, you need a way to trigger your onboarding process as soon as interest is expressed. A lot of people use forms like Google Forms and things like that. But to take it a step further and to make your outreach process even more seamless, you can use a very short email, but link in a personalized video that allows them to know that you thought of them personally and you've thought of why they should be on your show. This is before the step where you actually have them fill out a form. So instead of you manually editing an email to invite someone onto your show, and instead of sending the link to your type form or your Google form, you can send one simple email that has a specific video that you've recorded to kick off the onboarding process. So in the body of the email, you can have something like, "Hey, I saw your last post on X, Y, and Z, and I really thought you'd be a great fit. Click this link for your personal invitation to my podcast." Now, when they click the link has a lot more information about how maybe you've researched them or something specific that they said that really made you want to bring them onto the show. But the point is, you don't have to type this out every single time. There's one space, and we'll talk about how to automate this later, but there's only one space that's customized in your email, and then your video does the rest of the work. So this is when you're reaching out to someone to be on your podcast. You've already done the research on them and you know they'd be a great fit. You just need to send the invitation, and if they don't respond to that one, then you can send a follow-up email with the exact same video that does all of the work. Now, if people are reaching out to you to be on your podcast, this is when things get really simple. On my podcast, I use one simple landing page that describes what my podcast is about, who I'm looking for on my podcast, and a little bit about the show so that they understand if their story or their content matches up to the content that I like to share on my podcast. I don't do all of this in just written form. I use this in a static video that stays on the landing page that covers everything that needs to be covered on the podcast. So there's no information that's left up to chance. When someone comes onto my podcast, they know that they're a great fit. And before they fill out that form, they've already read the website, they've watched the video, which usually has the exact same information, and they've decided that this is a great use of their time. Start implementing short videos in your onboarding process in the beginning, either when you reach out to people expressing interest for them to be on your podcast or when people reach out to you. The videos do most of the heavy lifting, and it's a personal touch that makes it much easier for people to listen and understand what to expect before they apply to be on your show. Now, in your videos, be sure to bring your personality out. Keep your tone either casual or bubbly, whatever fits your podcast. That way, when you actually sit down and have a discovery call with your potential guests, they've already gotten a feel for your personality and what it would be like to talk to you. By the way, if you're serious about leveling up your podcast and creating a guest experience that actually works for you, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I create new videos on how to streamline your podcast workflow and improve your guest experience so that you can focus on creating a valuable show and let your system work for you on the back end. In this next section, we're going to talk about vetting. So, when you have someone on your podcast, most of the time, many podcasters have people come on because they think they're cool or they can ask them a couple of questions. But how do you know that that person is a good fit for your podcast? Well, if you haven't drawn out your guest criteria, then you probably don't know that they're a good fit for your podcast. So that's what we're talking about when we say vetting. Now, understand that there's a different vetting process for the people that you've actually researched and the people who have just reached out to you and asked to be on your podcast. These are going to be different relationships, but you need to capture the similar information. For instance, if you've reached out to someone already, then you know the topics that they discuss on their podcast, and you probably know whether they'd be a good conversationalist on your episode. So you don't want to ask questions like, what topics do you discuss in your podcast? What would you be excited to talk about on my podcast? Because technically they are not. They didn't reach out to you. You reached out to them. But those questions would be better suited for someone who reached out to you to be on your podcast. So my best advice to you would be to have two separate forms. You can capture just the basic information on what would you like to sell on this podcast? Would you like to promote something new? Do you have a book releasing? Those type of questions that go for your outreach guest. And then the person who's reaching out to you, you can start asking them a couple deeper questions to make sure that they might be worth it to have on your podcast. Their answers on your form should get you excited about this podcast. It should feel like the first 5 minutes of your episode. All of the ideas and thoughts come rushing into you because you're thinking about how can I approach this on my podcast? And remember, do not make your form sound like a job application. Make it fun and make it very clear that you want to provide the best value for your audience and theirs. So the best that they can answer the questions, the better that your episode will turn out. So how do you come up with questions for your intake form? Well, it's based on your guest criteria. If you know that there are certain things that they need to have achieved before they can talk about their experience, then you want to base your vetting process on your guest criteria. Let's take, for example, a fitness podcast. Perhaps you want to have them drop their client testimonials to show some photos of the transformations that they've been able to get their client. Or if you're an entrepreneurial type podcast and you talk about business, then you might have a criteria to understand how much revenue they've made in their business. Depending on where you are, this is also about your network. You can ask the questions that make it easier for you to have a real, authentic conversation on your podcast. The vetting process also saves you from having situations that come up where something negative happens about them in their own platform, and then that backlash comes onto you because you didn't actually vet out this guest. If your podcast is based on the results that your guests have achieved, then you want to have something that allows you to check on some of those results, whether it be their testimonials, their bank statements, or just the question that you go off of trust to ask them, hey, have you achieved X, Y, and Z? And they say yes or no, or they give you detail. So a couple other things that you want to check for when you're vetting your guests are their attitude, their reliability, and if you have a video podcast, then their equipment. Are they going to be able to help you produce a quality show, or will you have to deal with a lot of technical issues on the back end? So in this next step, we're going to talk about how you go deeper in your vetting process to make sure your show comes out to be amazing. Okay, so the next step in your onboarding process is to set up a pre-call. You're not just relying on a simple form to decide if you want to schedule time on your podcast. You're using that form to even decide if you want to schedule time to have a short conversation. Now, this short conversation is where you discuss the topics that they might want to bring up on your show. And also ask the very key question, is there anything that they want to promote on your podcast? You can talk about affiliate links that they can create on the back end before they come onto your podcast, or you can talk about when they might be releasing a certain book or things like that. So you can talk about it naturally on the episode and you don't sound super surprised. Depending on your delivery method, you might want to make it seem like you didn't know, but that's totally up to you. This pre-call allows you to touch on some of the things that will really, really matter on your podcast so that you can go deeper on the show and ask questions that your audience might really want to know. Your pre-call can be about 15 to 20 minutes. It doesn't need to be very long. This is just time for you to connect with your guests, just to talk about whatever they have going on, whether you talk about their family, whether you talk about your family, or what they have going on the week that you record. It doesn't even just have to be about the episode. The best thing about having a podcast with guests is that you get to build rapport and relationships with people in your industry and around your industry. So think about what you want to know about this person. Maybe it doesn't end up on your podcast, but you're building a genuine relationship. So treat this pre-call just like that. Now, even though I said that, don't let it stop you from asking repetitive questions on the podcast. You can address them as if, hey, we talked about this a little bit, but can you go deeper into X, Y, and Z? So feeling repetitive is not an issue. If they've already answered it on your form, then chances are that they're excited about talking about that on the podcast. So whether you talk about it on the pre-show or get into it just a little bit, make sure you get the goods for the full episode. Here's a quick tip. Think about your discovery call like a pregame or a warm-up. If they show up sloppy or unprepared, or they're kind of like all over the place, chances are that's how they're going to show up on your podcast. It's a red flag before you even get started. So whether you postpone the interview or just address it on the spot, make sure you understand either what's getting them flustered or how can you make sure that they show up in their best light on your podcast. Now, step 4 is having your communication automated. You never want to leave your guests guessing about what the experience is going to be like, what should they expect, what should they bring, what should they wear, and most importantly, you must tell people before they come onto your podcast if it's going to be a video podcast or just audio. No one wants to show up one way and then you take them through a completely separate journey. So in your automated communication, you can send things like a quick tech check tips, or you can send them the information that they need to know for the day of the interview. Everyone doesn't read their email in the moment, so you can have these reminders go out periodically between the time that they agree to be on your podcast and them actually coming onto the podcast. The simplest thing you can do to streamline your podcast is to use a booking link to book guests onto your podcast instead of going back and forth in your email process, locking down a time that fits, and then rescheduling, and then putting it in your phone, but not sending reminders out to your guests. Something as simple as Calendly will lock in a date, and then it'll send 1 or 2 reminders before the recording actually starts so that you don't have to do all of that work yourself. Now, if you don't want to be all in the weeds using Zapier to connect your Calendly, your Google Docs, your Google Forms, and all of these different shared docs just to confirm one interview, then I use something that's called the podcast machine. It literally takes one click of inviting people to the podcast, making sure that the necessary information is in place, and then the rest takes care of itself. So maybe you want to start with a simple Calendly link, but think about how you can automate the entire guest experience so that you can just show up on the day of in your best light, ready to help your guest shine. In your guest communication, you can email people, of course, but you also want to leverage text messaging. Most people text message anyway, so when it comes to something like your podcast recording, you don't want to leave this up to chance and just send everything to their email address. So maybe you have all of your reminders through email, but then you have those important ones, maybe 10 minutes and an hour, or hey, tomorrow is your interview, coming through as your text messages alongside your email communication. Now, this one a lot of people miss, which is your follow-ups and your thank you messages. Remember, when you invite someone to your podcast, a lot of times people get excited and they say, yes, I'll be on your show. And then you send out that first email and no one responds. So instead of you going back to your email, seeing if they respond, and then typing up a follow-up email, you can have an automated conversation where you initially invite them to the podcast. And if they don't respond, then your system automatically responds back to them to ask them if they are ready to schedule their podcast interview. Most of all, you don't have to do the work of following up so that they can actually book their podcast. Now, once they book, yes, the automation does take them through the process, but you also want to send a thank you note after you've recorded the episode and after you've released the episode. First and foremost, it expresses appreciation for them being on your podcast, but then it also creates another opportunity for you to build more rapport and a better relationship with your podcast guest. If they know someone else would be a great fit for your podcast, then why don't they refer them to your podcast? This was a huge game changer because if one guest can bring in revenue or if one guest can really tell their story that amplifies your podcast, then chances are they know someone in their community who can also help you out by providing the same, if not more, value for your audience. Listen, great guests love organization. So if you can help them out before the episode, they will show up like a pro on the episode. And that is what we are working towards. I'm curious what your biggest struggle has been with your podcast when it comes to having guests on your show. Is it no-shows or people coming up unprepared? It could even be tech issues. Listen, whether you're in person or you have a video podcast, tech issues comes up a lot. So tell me, which one of these might affect you? And if it's something else, drop it in the comments below. And hey, if you want some real help building a guest experience that actually impresses your guest and it makes your show much more easier to promote, then you can click the link in the description below. Or if you really want to connect and ask a couple questions before we get started, send me a DM on Instagram at RELYoung_ so I can help you put the best resources together to make your guest experience work for you. I love connecting with podcasters who are about their business, so feel free to hit me up if you're interested. I'm looking forward to answering any of your questions and helping you succeed in your podcasting journey.